Nigel Farage steps down as leader of UKIP, saying he's done his bit. He said he'd achieved his ambition of getting Britain to leave the European Union and that it was right to stand aside.
I now feel that I've done my bit, that I couldn't possibly achieve more than we managed to get in that referendum.
We'll be getting a reaction at Westminster and asking what it means for the future of UKIP. Also this lunchtime, Andrea Leadsom formally launches her bid to be the next Tory leader and Prime Minister, and calls for a mediation process to sort out the leadership crisis in the Labour Party. 3 days of official mourning in Iraq after a weekend bomb attack left 165 people dead. And the Juno space probe enters the most critical phase of its 5-year mission to discover more about the planet Jupiter.
In the south, vulnerable and alone, the children from outside the EU seeking asylum here. Now more councils are asked to help out. And hundreds of rail services cut as Southern brings in a new timetable to deal with staff shortages.
Good afternoon and welcome to the BBC News at 1. Nigel Farage has announced he's stepping down as leader of UKIP. He's done it before, of course, but this time he says he really means it. He said his aim in politics had always been to get Britain out of the European Union. And after the referendum resulted in a vote for Brexit, he said he'd done his bit and couldn't possibly achieve more. We'll have more on that in a moment. First, though, Andrea Leadsom, one of the leaders of the Brexit campaign, has launched her bid to become the next Conservative leader, saying she is the person to negotiate the best deal on Brexit and that she would stop freedom of movement. Earlier, the Foreign Secretary Philip Hammond, who's supporting Home Secretary Theresa May, says the next Prime Minister will have to consider a range of restrictions on EU immigration and that it would be absurd to assume that all EU nationals would be allowed to stay in the UK. Our political correspondent Eleanor Garnier reports.
The latest Conservative to launch their leadership bid.
We are choosing freedom, away from the stifling EU institutions.
And as she made her pitch, Andrea Leadsom went straight to the heart of the Brexit debate.
I commit today to guaranteeing the rights of our EU friends who have already come here to live and work. We must give them certainty. There is no way they will be bargaining chips in our negotiations.
Central to the case for leaving the EU was curbing immigration by scrapping the automatic right of EU migrants to come to the UK. Tory contenders who backed Brexit say they're determined to end free movement. But Theresa May, a Remain campaigner, and her supporters say we shouldn't make promises we can't keep.
When you go into a negotiation, all the parts are moving, all the parts are on the table, and it would be absurd to make a unilateral commitment about EU nationals living in the UK without, at the very least, getting a similar commitment from the European Union about British nationals living in the EU.
But Michael Gove's team say if he became Prime Minister, he would guarantee the right of existing EU migrants. And his backers insist they're listening to voters.
I want to welcome into the country people who will make a contribution to our economy and to our national life. But I'm also very clear that we do need to reduce immigration, and we can no longer have the kind of free movement which allowed anybody just to walk into this country without our being able to control it.
The man accused of turning the immigration debate toxic today spelt out where the leadership candidates should stand on the rights of EU migrants.
Everybody who has come to this country legally has fully protected rights. The fact that hereafter, we will have a different immigration system and not have an open door is a separate issue. But I take the point, and people do need some reassurance and perhaps a little bit more calm.
As the divisions between the Tory leadership rivals begin to sharpen, exactly where they stand on Brexit seems to matter the most. The main issues: freedom of movement, migrants' rights, access to the single market, and just how quickly we should pull out of the EU. One by one, they'll make their case and try to give a clear picture of what life will be like outside the EU. This choice isn't just about the party's future, but the country's too. Eleanor Garnier, BBC News, Westminster.
Let's get more now on the resignation of the UKIP leader Nigel Farage, who announced he would be stepping down following the result of the EU referendum. This report from our political correspondent Ben Wright contains flash photography.
A man with a surprise up his sleeve. In Westminster this morning, UKIP's leadership set out its next steps. The party's ambition to take Britain out of the EU has been met, and for Nigel Farage that meant job done.
I have never been, and I've never wanted to be, a career politician. My aim in being in politics was to get Britain out of the European Union. That is what we voted for in that referendum 2 weeks ago. And that is why I now feel that I've done my bit, that I couldn't possibly achieve more than we managed to get in that referendum. And so I feel it's right that I should now stand aside as leader of UKIP.
UKIP has been his life for over 2 decades, but today Nigel Farage looked relieved the job of leading it would soon fall to someone else.
During the referendum campaign, I said, I want my country back. And what I'm saying today is I want my life back. And it begins right now. Thank you.
Today, Nigel Farage insisted Britain's vote to leave the EU would not have happened without him and his party. And there is truth in that. UKIP put an EU referendum on the agenda and mobilised the vote. For a party with just one MP, UKIP's impact on politics has been huge. Nigel Farage was one of UKIP's founders in 1994 and stood for the party in Eastleigh. The man who'd started off as a metals trader in the city was heading into politics. He won a seat in the European Parliament in 1999 and did not play by the normal rules.
You have the charisma of a damp rag and the appearance of a low-grade bank clerk.
Ridiculing the institution he wanted Britain to leave. Farage wasn't like other politicians, with his fag-rattle laugh and love of a drink. The cameras lapped it up, but at first there was little electoral success. It was mocked by David Cameron in 2006, who dismissed UKIP as fruitcakes, loonies and closet racists. Farage would have the last laugh. While campaigning for a seat at Westminster in 2010, Mr Farage was badly injured in a plane crash, an experience that spurred him on. He resigned the party leadership, only to change his mind within days, citing overwhelming support from UKIP members. The party won 4 million votes and got 1 MP at last year's general election, Douglas Carswell. Today, this is the tweet Mr Carswell sent out on hearing Nigel Farage's news. Proof they have never had an easy relationship.
For 20 years, he ploughed a lonely furrow and he helped ensure that we got the referendum. But clearly there are differences of opinion between him and me as to how we should best win the referendum. By being generous and upbeat and internationalistic and optimistic, Vote Leave won that referendum. I think it's right that Nigel takes some credit for holding the referendum.
As Nigel Farage accepts himself, he splits opinion. An ugly rabble-rouser to some, a hero to others. But if he really is hanging up his captain's hat for good, politics will certainly lose some of its colour. Ben Wright, BBC News, Westminster.
Let's go to our assistant political editor, Norman Smith, in Westminster. Another political week gets underway. Nobody saw David Cameron standing aside. No one saw Boris Johnson standing aside. Nobody saw this.
I'm thinking we should perhaps employ a clairvoyant or maybe do a bit of light tarot card reading, because you're right, no one at Westminster saw this coming, that Nigel Farage should stand down at the moment of his success when he has secured this referendum, which he's been campaigning for all his life. And when he says there's still a role for UKIP in ensuring there's no backsliding or appeasement, as he said, over Brexit, and he still thinks that there's potential for his party to grow in the Labour heartlands. He still wants UKIP to have a role in the negotiations, and yet he's going. Why? I think part of it is because he feels UKIP has reached the end of the road. They have secured what they were set up to secure, and he himself said UKIP are the turkeys who voted for Christmas. But there's one other thing. Nigel Farage is a politician who thrives on controversy, drama, being part of the headlines. And I wonder if he thought after the excitement of the referendum, life might have just been a bit dull in UKIP.
Norman, thank you very much. So what is the status of citizens of other EU countries who are already here in Britain? This morning, thousands of migrants have been calling for legally guaranteed protection for the 2 million EU migrants currently working in the UK following the UK's vote to leave. Our Home Affairs correspondent Tom Simons reports.
Over the decades, they've become embedded in the British population, but today they're making an effort to stand out because they say they're worried about what happens next.
It's frustrating because we didn't have the chance to vote for the Brexit, and now we're in a position where we can't decide about our future, really. And politicians are talking about us like we are bargaining tools.
Their protest also spread across social media, concern born of uncertainty. After all, in the last momentous week, what the politicians have been saying has been, well, difficult to pin down.
There will be no immediate changes in your circumstances.
I will end free movement.
There's no change at the moment, but of course we have to factor that into the negotiation.
So no immediate change, but we might have to negotiate. We're talking about up to 3 million people. That's the population from the rest of the EU living in the UK. About 2/3 have been here for 5 years or more. The British government's given them the right to stay, and that's unlikely to change. But the coming diplomatic battle for access to Europe's markets may involve discussions about the rest, with the added complication that British people also live abroad and they'll be affected too. So it's not easy to give a clear commitment, though Labour's leadership is.
This is a bottom line for Labour, that we will guarantee those rights, because, to be frank, those people deserve the security.
Now some point to the Vienna Convention, which says if an international treaty is torn up, perhaps because a country leaves the EU, that does not affect any right, obligation or legal situation of the parties which already exist. But the lawyers aren't all in agreement. The parties here are actually the countries who've signed the treaty, not their citizens. Other agreements might take precedence. So it's uncertainty all round, and it could last for years. Tom Simons, BBC News.
Meanwhile, a British law firm has begun legal action to stop the government triggering the UK's exit from the EU without an act of Parliament. Mishcon de Reya is acting on behalf of a group of unnamed business people and academics. Ministers say Parliament will have a role in finding the best way forward. Well, our legal affairs correspondent Clive Coleman is here. There are some pretty heavyweight voices here. How strong a case have they got?
Interesting case. Well, what they're saying is that any Prime Minister, whoever he or she may be, who triggers the Article 50 process, the process by which the UK will leave the EU, using what are known as executive or prerogative powers, these are powers derived from the Crown from medieval times, using that alone would be acting unlawfully, because to do so would effectively render dead the 1972 European Communities Act. That's the act which enshrines our membership of the EU and enshrines its treaties into our domestic law. So what is being said is that only legislation can outstrip legislation and overturn legislation. So what would be needed is an act of Parliament giving the Prime Minister the authority with which to trigger that process. Now, as you say, the government have said that Parliament will clearly have a role in making sure that we find the best way forward. So they're not exactly disagreeing with the Mishcon de Reya case. You ask how strong their case is. Well, I think the democratic juggernaut that's been unleashed by the referendum vote is hurtling, or perhaps that should be chuntering towards the exit doors of the EU. There are times, Simon, when politics simply overtake the law. The lawyers can bring challenges. My feeling is that the juggernaut is going to hurtle or chunter through those doors at some stage, whatever the lawyers do.
Clive, thank you very much, Clive Coleman. The Shadow Chancellor, John McDonnell, has said Labour needs to start a mediation process to sort out the crisis over the future of its leader. But the former Shadow Business Secretary, Angela Eagle, says she'll step in to resolve the situation if Jeremy Corbyn doesn't stand down soon.
It's a week since Jeremy lost that vote of no confidence, and there are many other people up and down the country wanting him to consider his position. He's not properly engaged with even the deputy leader of the party, who was elected with a mandate too. It's now time that he did so. There are many people, MPs, party members up and down the country asking me to resolve this impasse, and I will if something isn't done soon. That's all I've got to say.
Are you still prepared to run against him?
I have the support to run and resolve this impasse, and I will do so if Jeremy doesn't take action soon. Now that's all I've got to say.
Well, our political correspondent Vicky Young is in Westminster, and still Jeremy Corbyn holds on.
Yeah, I mean, resignations seem to be very fashionable around Westminster at the moment, but not for Jeremy Corbyn. We're in a holding pattern, really, where 170 Labour MPs have said they don't have confidence in their leader, but he is staying on. Now, this morning, one of his allies said that Mr Corbyn's door was open to any MP who wanted to come and see him, but several have complained to me they just cannot get in to see him and to say to him they think that he should stand down. Now, there has been this talk of some kind of negotiated settlement, maybe by the unions, maybe Lord Prescott playing that role, but it seems very hard to see how they can find a way through this. In the end, you have the party members who voted overwhelmingly for Mr Corbyn, and we're told many new members joining, signing up to Momentum, that campaign group that backed Mr Corbyn so wholeheartedly. But you also need a parliamentary Labour Party for the party to function here in Parliament. And at the moment, that simply isn't happening. So what Labour MPs say they're doing is giving Mr Corbyn more time to stand down. He is preparing this afternoon to appear before the Home Affairs Select Committee to talk about anti-Semitism. He will then speak in Parliament on Wednesday on the Chilcot report into the Iraq war. But Angela Eagles made it very clear that she will challenge him if he doesn't resign. So that is the situation we're in. And some Labour MPs saying to me they do think it will now go to a leadership contest, and they say that they will have the fight of their lives for the future of the Labour Party.
Vicky Young, thank you. The Iraqi government has declared 3 days of national mourning after the weekend's bomb attack in the heart of Baghdad. Officials say 165 people were killed and more than 200 injured when a lorry packed with explosives was blown up in a busy shopping area. So-called Islamic State says it carried out the attack. Will Ross reports.
In the rubble of a huge bomb blast, candles, prayers and tears. The so-called Islamic State sent the lorry packed with explosives into the heart of Baghdad when the streets were full of people celebrating the Eid festival during the holy month of Ramadan. This man says most people who died were in their 20s. He says the Iraqi government just sits there doing nothing to improve the security. Among the young victims, a popular dancer who was gaining international recognition. Adal El-Jaf, known as Al Euro, narrowly survived previous bombings and had described his own country as a storm of destruction. As they try to erase the visual reminders of what happened in Baghdad over the weekend, people are once again furious with the government. It has ordered new security measures for Baghdad, including getting these bomb detectors off the streets. Why they're still being used at checkpoints is baffling. 5 years ago, the BBC found out that they were fake and served no purpose whatsoever. People who fled the city of Fallujah are also desperate for help. The government recently celebrated retaking the city from the jihadists, which prompted the so-called Islamic State to bomb Baghdad. For those displaced from Fallujah, it's been a painful Ramadan. How can I celebrate Eid away from my city, asks Omar. We, the people of Fallujah, have been humiliated. As the victims of the bomb blast are buried, there'll be a lot of talk in the UK this week about the Chilcot report and why Britain invaded back in 2003. Expect to hear about that search for WMDs. Since then, many different weapons of mass destruction have been causing misery for the people of Iraq. Will Ross, BBC News.
Coming up to 1:20, our top story this lunchtime. Nigel Farage steps down as leader of UKIP, saying he's done his bit in getting Britain to leave the European Union.
At Wimbledon, we're into the business end of the tournament. All 16 fourth-round matches, including Andy Murray against Nick Kyrgios, coming up today.
And in South today, hundreds of rail services a day could be axed. Southern brings in an emergency timetable to deal with staff shortages. And revving up for a return to the track, the campaign to bring Speedway back to Reading.
A NASA spacecraft is about to arrive at the largest planet in the solar system, Jupiter. The probe was launched in 2011 and has travelled nearly 2 billion miles. Entering into orbit will be the mission's most critical phase, but if the spacecraft succeeds, it will give us our best understanding of the planet to date. Our science correspondent Rebecca Morell reports.
The giant of our solar system.
Beneath its clouds, Jupiter is a world shrouded in mystery. But we're about to see it up close.
3, 2, 1, ignition and liftoff.
NASA's Juno spacecraft blasted off in 2011. It's been on an epic journey, travelling nearly 3 billion kilometres. Now, finally, Jupiter's in its sights, but it faces its biggest challenge. To be grabbed into orbit, Juno needs to slam on its brakes. If the timing is off, the $1 billion mission could be lost.
The team's feeling a mixture of excitement and anticipation with tension, because we have a really difficult maneuver ahead of us to get into orbit, and if it doesn't go just right, we'll fly right past the planet.
But if Juno succeeds, the science will begin. This spacecraft's going to get closer to Jupiter than we've ever been before. It will skirt over the giant red spot, a colossal storm raging on the planet. It will search for water and oxygen and peer beneath the clouds to reveal what lies at the planet's core. It could even shed light on the origins of the solar system. Jupiter's thought to have been the first planet to form and has remained largely unchanged. But studying this colossal world won't be easy. This spacecraft's built like an armoured tank. It will have to survive everything that Jupiter throws at it.
When Juno goes into orbit around Jupiter, we're going to be going through this really nasty, hazardous region, the radiation belts that are very close to the planet. And they are nasty and could destroy and attack all of the electronics. So we have to be careful.
Juno's closing in fast on Jupiter. Scientists now face a tense wait to see if their mission will succeed. Rebecca Morell, BBC News, NASA Mission Control, Pasadena.
3 Barclays Bank traders have been found guilty of rigging the interbank lending rate, LIBOR. Jonathan Matthew, Jay Merchant and Alex Pabon were convicted of conspiracy to defraud in the setting of the LIBOR rate between 2005 and 2007. The verdicts were reached last week, but reporting restrictions were only lifted today. Let's go to our economics correspondent Andy Verity, who's at Southwark Crown Court. Andy.
Yes, Simon, these are very strange verdicts in a way, because you've had 3 people convicted. The ones convicted were Jonathan Matthew, as you mentioned, who's 35, who's a LIBOR submitter, Jay Merchant, who's a trader who was making requests to Matthew to move LIBOR up or down. LIBOR, of course, is the interest rate at which banks borrow money from each other. Now, you could make money as a trader if you could move it up or down, but the traders who are making the requests, some of them haven't been convicted, and the 2 that haven't been convicted are Ryan Reich, who's 34, and Stelios Kontagoulas, who's 44, which is strange because Jonathan Matthew was accused of accepting requests from precisely them. They haven't been convicted, and he has. And the key question now is the Serious Fraud Office has to decide whether or not it's going to go for a retrial. The jury clearly couldn't agree that the last 2 were guilty, and also only one of the verdicts was reached unanimously. Now, I've been doing a panorama on this and finding out all kinds of interesting and shocking things about who knew what and when about LIBOR fiddling, and you can expect that sometime in the next couple of weeks. For now, though, the ball is in the court of the Serious Fraud Office.
Andy Verity, thank you very much. A man has pleaded guilty to grievous bodily harm after an 18-month-old boy was shot in the head. Appearing at Bristol Magistrates Court, Jordan Walters, who's 24, was remanded in custody to appear at Crown Court on July the 18th. Emma Horseman, who's 23 and is accused of the same offence, pleaded not guilty and was denied bail. The child was shot on Friday and remains in a critical condition in hospital. The Euro 2016 dream is over for Iceland after a 5-2 defeat to the hosts France in last night's quarter-final in Paris. But despite their tournament coming to an end, the team have given fans at home plenty to cheer about, as Matthew Price reports now from Reykjavik.
There was only one word on their lips.
I'm just proud. I'm very proud. I'm proud.
They said the whole country was either at the match or here on a hillside, bathed in the late-night midsummer sun, as the Viking charge was brought to a shuddering halt. It just doesn't feel like a loss.
Iceland on the global map.
This is how they reacted at the end of full time.
It's been good tournament for Iceland, but it was expected. France is the best team in this tournament, and they're gonna win Euro. So
we lost, but still we won. And as you can see, we're just really proud because we have the best national team in the world, and it's a big thing for Iceland.
Well, you would have thought they had actually won, wouldn't you? This is just a massive party going on here on the edge of the Arctic Circle, under the almost endless daylight that they get at this time of year. And despite that defeat to France, well, many people here in Iceland will tell you that this was a victory. And already they're looking to the future, to the team's return today. A celebration, no recriminations, and then the next World Cup. They still believe. Matthew Price, BBC News, Reykjavik.
Well, Wales take on Portugal in the semi-finals of Euro 2016 in Lyon on Wednesday, and thousands of Welsh fans are desperately trying to find a way to get there as travel options begin to run out. Manager Chris Coleman says they thrive on being the underdogs and have urged Welsh fans to dare to dream. Ollie Foster is in Paris for us. Ollie.
Simon, we've got a couple of rest days here in France before what could be seen as a dream semi-final lineup, really. Germany against France on Thursday. That's a real heavyweight clash, isn't it? But of course, the first of the semi-finals in Lyon is going to be special for so many reasons, which is why Wales, you would have thought, will come to a complete standstill on Wednesday night after waiting so long to reach a major tournament over 50 years. They could never have dreamed that they'd get to the semi-finals here, but they're brilliant against the Belgians in the quarter-finals, and they're going to take a lot of positives into that match against the Portuguese. They were back in training this morning down in Brittany at their base there. The manager, Chris Coleman, you mentioned, he's got his tactics absolutely spot on during this tournament, but they are going to be without a couple of key players. The defender, Ben Davies, perhaps more critically, Aaron Ramsey, who's had an absolutely brilliant tournament. Both are suspended. Of course, this match is being billed as the meeting of the two Galacticos, Gareth Bale and Cristiano Ronaldo. You can see Wayne Hennessy there being put through his paces. Hopefully he's not going to be too busy. Bale and Ronaldo have never gone head-to-head for the first time internationally. Gareth Bale's actually going to give a news conference in the next few minutes. We'll get his take on the match. Portugal have been really poor. Haven't won a game inside 90 minutes at the tournament. Ronaldo, for all his talents, he's yet to really get going in France. Wales will be keeping everything crossed, of course, Simon. That continues.
Ollie, thank you very much. Ollie Foster there in Paris. Britain's Andy Murray will face Australia's Nick Kyrgios in the fourth round of Wimbledon later, and despite Novak Djokovic's surprise exit last week, the number 2 seed says he faces a formidable challenge to win the Grand Slam title for a second time. David Ornstein is at Wimbledon. David.
Simon, welcome to the second week of Wimbledon, the business end of the tournament. This is arguably the best day of the fortnight, with big matches wherever you look, and provided the rain stays away, we're in for a treat.
From People's Sunday to Manic Monday, yesterday's extra day put Wimbledon back on track. It means all 16 fourth-round singles matches will be played today. First up on centre court, Roger Federer. That swing has earned the Swiss 7 titles here, but he wants 8. And with Novak Djokovic gone, has Federer's path to the final been cleared? Later, it's the turn of Andy Murray. Like Federer, he's yet to drop a set. Murray's beaten Nick Kyrgios in all 4 of their previous meetings, but now he's the favourite for the title. Will he cope with the added pressure?
He's a great player, and I'm going to do everything I can to prepare, and hopefully I can, the stars align and I can play some really good tennis. But at the same time, I'm just going to enjoy the experience stepping out on centre court again.
In the ladies' draw, Serena Williams is of course the main draw. Her sister Venus is in action too. They're the oldest women left in the competition, a combined 28 major titles to their name, both legends of the game.
Venus Williams is 36 years old, and she's into the 4th round and back into the top 10 of the world. It's pretty impressive. This is her 19th Wimbledon, 17th Wimbledon for Serena. They've been around an awfully long time at such a high level.
And they're among 6 Americans through to the last 16. That's more than any other nation. Happy 4th of July.
Well, on the court behind us, court 18 here, Nicolas Mahut of France is taking on Sam Querrey. Sam Querrey, of course, who upset Novak Djokovic. They've both had a break of serve in the first set. Over on centre court, Roger Federer is a break up against Steve Johnson. Following them on court is Serena Williams, and then the day finishes on centre with Andy Murray. Simon.
David, thank you very much for that. Well, let's have a look at the weather now. Chris Fawkes is here. Everybody in Wimbledon looking skyward, as we all are, of course.
Indeed, Simon. Well, I have to say, Wimbledon's probably not looking too bad for this week, but if you want warm, sunny, dry weather for your summertime weather, what you really don't want to see is a jet stream mowing right over the top of the UK. You want it actually well to the north, but that's not what we've got at the moment. With a jet stream overhead, this is steering areas of low pressure our way. And at the moment, we've got a low pressure that's bringing rain to northern areas of the UK. There's another one out just to the east of Canada that'll be bringing some wet weather on Wednesday, and a little bit more rain to come as well across western areas on Thursday. So there will be some wet weather around. Our weather's changed quite a bit already, though, this morning. This was the scene in Walton-on-Thames this morning with plenty of sunshine, but 40 minutes later, sent in by the same weather watcher, Mayor, you can see just how much the cloud had built in. And that is also shown quite nicely on the satellite picture. You get a sense of not just the cloud moving in, but also bubbling up as well. So for one way or another, for many of us through the rest of the day today, it is going to be quite cloudy, the best of the sunshine across eastern areas of England. And further north, well, this is where we've got our area of low pressure, bringing some rain. It's going to be quite persistent rain too in Scotland, and probably some heavier bursts working into southern areas as well. The wet weather still with us for Northern Ireland, edging into the far north of England. The best of the way of sunshine probably towards the likes of Lincolnshire, parts of Yorkshire and on towards East Anglia, where temperatures will reach the low 20s and it should feel pretty pleasant. Elsewhere, a lot of cloud around, could bring one or two passing isolated showers, but by and large for a good chunk of England and Wales, we're looking at a dry afternoon. And overnight tonight, our low-pressure system sweeps its way eastwards. The rain turns a little bit lighter, some patches of light rain and drizzle really swinging the way eastwards across England and Wales through the night. I'm probably feeling a little on the humid side, temperatures 14 to 16 degrees with the cloud cover, a little bit fresher that bit further north. Now tomorrow, any cloud and rain should clear off pretty quickly, and we'll be looking at things gradually brightening up, some sunny intervals poking through the cloud. There will be a few showers, though, to come, particularly across Scotland and one or two for the northeast of England. Otherwise, a fair amount of dry weather. With the sunny spells, temperatures should again reach the low 20s, but it's not exactly blistering summer heat, is it? Now, as we get towards the second half of the week, we're going to see those areas of low pressure that I started off showing you across the Atlantic. They'll be swinging the way in towards the northwest of the UK in particular. High pressure still just about holding on in the south, should steer most of the rain clear from southeast England. But otherwise, there will be some pulses of rain to come, particularly across the north and west of the country, and temperatures staying pretty much where they are at the moment, generally the high teens to the low 20s. That's how the weather is shaping up, but I will let you know if I see sight of any long summer spells of warm weather.
Oh, please do. Chris, thank you very much. A reminder of our top story this lunchtime. Nigel Farage steps down as leader of UKIP, saying he's done his bit in getting Britain to leave the European Union. That's all from us. Now on BBC One, it's time for the news where you are. From me, good afternoon.